cooling off from what was a pretty intense heat wave, but still warm enough to have me soaked by about 8:30 in the morning. I'm out in the field down the way from us and looking at some of the crops this season. I'd like to take a look and give some updates about what's happening. The first update is that there is a massive upgrade in the form of wood chips. There was a crew working on the line management, which tends to be an extremely abundant flow of wood chips. So an outside crew that was doing work for the electric company on this road, and I talked to their foreman and said, if I can put milk crates where I want some chips, can you drop them? They brought 3 loads. I actually took a bunch of video as we processed it. I'll share that at the end. I'll make a little montage and explain. We went through 3 loads. There were 2 that were over there. There was 1 that was here. There's little ghosts of them now. It was about 30 to 40 yards of finely ground Perennial mid-season green wood chips, about the best I could want. But with 90+ degrees, it's hard to do anyway. But then on top of that, they were getting extremely hot really fast. So we moved them quickly. They're laid in, and that's a major theme of the update in this video. We went through and side dressed to the best of our ability, sometimes with hand folding crates, sometimes with wheelbarrow loads, depending on the aperture, the opening that we had to work with. But basically applied those wood chips as deeply as we could, not banked up and onto and around the plants, because that could heat them up and hurt them, but on top of compost, on top of shredded leaves, on top of fresh grass clippings, which is a major part of the nourishment and weed suppression regime that I use in this landscape. I use an electric riding mower with a bagger. All the material that is mowed is deposited around whoever seems to need it. The potatoes, the peppers, whatever, onions are sitting a little bit lower than others. They get those green manures, and you can see the wood chips are dumped and then spread out later on once they cool off to keep all of that moisture nice and around the plants, and they love it. Potatoes got their 2nd round of hilling. I think I can probably do a 3rd, although I want to let these chips rest for a while, maybe even get some compost on top, because the next cut would be a little bit more into the sod, and it would grab wood chips and send them banked around the potatoes. I think they'd root into that just fine. Share some notes if you've got ideas on that or concerns. But now that they've got 2 rounds of hilling and a good deep liberal mulch of both grass clippings and then wood chips on top, there are some weedy patches here or there, but by and large, these potato blocks are coming through really, really nice. Some little spotty spots here or there, but overall pretty strong. In fact, this is the healthiest looking, the most vigorous and largest, greenest potato line we have, and they're entirely from a unnamed red potato that I fished out of the compost stream from our local food co-op back a few months ago. They were sprouting, or they're pushing eyes just a little bit, and I was like, boy, it's a nice looking potato. I don't know what type it is, but they went right in here and they're running running the pack. I mean, they look so good. Pretty much 0 weeds in there, another round of hilling or 2 and mulching, and they should be extremely yieldy. In the last field video update, I asked for community advice around peppers. In particular, it was this line of 50 or so dwarfing red bell peppers that go right down this line. They're looking beautiful. They're starting to put on a little bit of a fruit set, which I might want to actually harvest some of those off. My question at the time was, hey, what do you guys think? Should I go through and pinch the tops and head them back? Or just pull off flowers that are forming to promote better growth? People responded affirmingly in both accounts, but a number of folks were saying their suggestion was to not go ahead and pinch the tops at this point to get them bushier and lower, but definitely to pull off whatever flowers were hanging on. And so I did do that, and it feels as though these plants responded really nicely. We got some good rains recently, and there's just a lot of good new growth in there, and now they're starting to make flowers. It feels reasonable to let them start to do so. I might continue the experiment and, for example, possibly around the middle point west, continue to pluck all the flowers for a little bit and see if they actually set up a better overall scaffold and structure for themselves and yield better. So any more notes on that people want to share, I'm really happy to take them on. But you can see a couple are starting to make their little sweetums. Oh, let's see if we got, there we go. I'll let that redden up a little bit, but I think I'm going to start harvesting these green peppers on the early side at first to let them continue to focus. We've got a long season ahead, and I'd love to see these be just huge mature plants. Yeah, that was a little vole. That's fun. You can probably see the plants wiggling. There's two mating voles running back and forth, having a lovely time in here. I'm not seeing damage from them, so it's just kind of sweet, a little bit spooky, but we'll just let that happen. Second question for folks here. I'm at a cusp with this. I'm interested to know. This is the earliest I've seen our potatoes flowering. They're beautiful. My intuition is that these flowers probably start to pull the energy away from root production and into establishing sexual flowers and tops. A couple would be fun, but I don't think I need an entire block of them. I'm wondering, again, what do you guys think? Is it worth pulling flowers? I've grown potatoes for a number of years, but I've never had so much flowering so early. I wonder if it's either a stress response or that they're really happy. I'm hoping it's that they're happy, but does it make a difference to pluck all those? If I don't hear back, I'm sure I will, and so I'm excited to hear, but my baseline is to leave one area as is and do a different thing in another area and see at the end of the season. Either way, I'll probably do that, but what do folks think experience-wise with that? Our tomatoes are planted for this entire 120-foot long line. There's a little break in the middle where there's a walkway, and then they continue on again. These are all save seed of Sasha Selects. They're all indeterminate tomatoes in blocks. We will probably go through and hammer in staves and run trellising line. I think I might do metal T-posts pounded every 10 feet and then a wooden post in between those and run some sort of like pretty good high tension nylon wire for the season, nylon rope that we can pass them through, like make a little channel that they can be fed up through every foot. So we'll see how that goes. I'd like to see what happens with some of these. If we lay down hay flakes, mow tight, lay down hay flakes, and let them as an indeterminate just simply sprawl on a good mulch, can they grow fine enough and put on enough of a crop that we don't have to do all that trellising work? The nursery aspects of the field are starting to take off in a nice way. You can see here is a row of cuttings. It's actually a pretty sweetly complex bed. There's on the north here, they're yastaberry and then elderberry. It kind of switches between varieties down this entire line, so the northern part of this, and then in the center of the bed there is seedling black walnuts. And yes, juglone is a thing and it has negative influence, but not when they're little babies like this, and they're loving it in here. So we're going to grow these cultivar selected seedling black walnuts in the middle, and to the south we've got our storage onions growing as well. So in a 3-foot bed, it is a pretty high value partitioning of a 3-way cropping system of allium to the south, tree crop in the middle, and cuttings that are rooting along the north. And then sporadically there'll be some cool character who shows up that we say yes to in the middle of all that. Similarly complex bed just to the south of that one. Same picture on the north, our cuttings we put in the fall of elderberry, of currants, etc., etc. In the center are a nitrogen fixing line of bush beans, so standalone self-standing beans. These are either Provider or Gold Rush. To the south of that is a cabbage crop on 18-inch centers. To the south of that are beets that are tucked in under the leaf of the cabbage. Our chickens really, really love cabbage leaves, and I think if we keep on top of clean breaking the southern line of their leaves, the cabbages can still make a big crop, and the beets can start to get a good push and squeeze out into the south here. So 4 crops in a 3-foot long bed space, 3-foot wide by 50 or 60-foot long bed space, but a lot of value packed into one bed. And between the rabbits and the deer, and sometimes it's hot, sometimes it's dry, sometimes it's super wet, these sorts of combos generally yield you at least something at the end of the season, hopefully 4 things. Carrots are looking strong. We've been hand weeding a bit. I went through with the tilther and really worked the soil so it was fine before we sowed, which brought up a lot of weed seeds, but the carrots were happy, and now they're taking canopy, so they're on their way to being the first time probably ever I've had a nice crop. I think I do need to thin them pretty soon. I would take feedback on that too. Whoops, they're breaking. So maybe I come out after a good rain and we go through and like thin some stripes through here, see if there's some good edible parts. This is all save seed from my dear friend Eric. Thank you, Eric. He gave me a sack of purple and orange carrots 3 years ago. A bunch overwintered, and I planted them out, collected the seed, and so this is the Eric Grex. Sweet potatoes are basically sitting still in some of these spots. I think the rabbit browse, we're getting closer. Lesson learned. I don't think in the future I want to plant rabbit consumable crops near this context. There's like 30+ acres of just shrubland in here, and it's gorgeous. Any night I come out, there'll be like 6, kitten-sized baby boonies popping around and nibbling every bean, nibbling everything. They're so tiny right now, they're not that impactful, but anything next to this hedgerow needs to be rabbit resistant. They're leaving the potatoes alone, they're leaving the squash that we've planted there, but they're hammering the corn, they're hammering the beans that I've planted, and they're making their way in a little bit further and really putting pressure on the sweet potatoes. So I'm going to add some urine around them, they like nitrogen anyway, and then see if that helps. If that doesn't, I'll add blood meal, and that should be a bit repulsive but also stimulating for the growth. But they're here, and I think once they get past some of the browse a little bit and they start to get a little bit thicker and a little crazier, they should be a little bit stronger. So lesson learned, these first 2 or 3 rows that are adjacent to a hedgerow need to be allium, they need to be, maybe it's a collection of mints for the nursery. What is it that's going to be like absolutely rabbit and deer repulsive as the first line of defense, the first boundary before they enter further in? Let me know if you want a deeper dive. I could do like a 20-minute, even 30-minute wander through here at some point. There's just a lot happening now. This field is coming into its 3rd year of production. Potatoes first, then garlic, and now this wild diversity. There's probably 30 or 40 different types of productive plants that are set in motion in here. It's a bit weedy, and that's okay, but you know, I got to come through and do a little bit more mulching and weed whacking. But some of the perennial aspects, like these rooted seaberry that are now suckering, are doing incredibly well, and they are triggering some really strong growth of the brassicas planted amongst them. I thought that would be an interesting way of having nitrogen fixation and sun partitioning the south of this plant, not affecting their ability to grow. The cabbage can grow out, be a ground cover, and the seaberry seems really pleased with that. They're growing, they're doing their thing, and then cabbages and kale popping from in between. So a lot of fun experiments in this field around some of the lessons we've learned with guild development in the fully perennial realm, and asking the question, what's the morphology? Like, this is a plant that's not wholly unlike a comfrey or a rhubarb or a horseradish. Low and sprawling and broad leaves. It's an annual, wonderful. Let's companion that with a perennial. Or is this a corn or sorghum crop that then, so an annual that then has good King Henry or sorrel that is perennial as the ground cover? So lots of opportunity to have more interspecies and intermorphology and time scale and successional arc plants hanging out with each other. English walnut, is it going to be a nice trellis for tomatoes this year? I bet it will be, but I don't know. Anyway, that's it for now. I'll share more later. Now it segues to talking about how we moved all those chips in a pretty short amount of time. I connected with the crew and told them I'd put a milk crate out with a note and my contact info, and then a milk crate where each spot where we were hoping to get wood chips delivered. Used the electric car truck combo for this project extensively, and you can see lots and lots of areas that could really use a deep mulching of chips to reduce weeds. We're using folding crates here as our unit to deliver. We can put them on the trailer. Since it's a relatively flat field, we can move around pretty easily. Lots and lots of leaves, incredible goodness to feed the soil. It's going to take a minute for that fertility to release, but it's all there. And that little electric car moves quite a bit of chips per load. Our friend Joe showed up in the morning. We had some matching outfits here to work with, and we found out a system. He suggested, what if we just lay up the first course and load the chips directly on into the crates, and then next course and the next course, and so it gives us like a full truckload. Took about 8 of those to move that pile of chips. You can see here the tomatoes needing chips, and then my sweaty body moving the crate one at a time. It's a little bit slow, but it's very detailed and accurate. We're able to side dress all of these crops. So you can see right down the line, tomatoes getting a really thorough side dressing of chips there. Super sweaty, kind of nasty. And here we are side dressing potatoes as well. So a lot of nutrient, a lot of covering of the soil, and a lot of protection. The car is nearly silent and really enjoyable to work with this. It's about as loud as it gets. I think the loudest thing with this car is actually opening and closing doors, surprisingly. So our second pile, or third pile of chips was delivered a little bit closer to some other areas. We used a wheelbarrow for this, and it's basically dump into piles in the walkways, and then used our transfer fork to spread them out and smooth them after dumping. And things are coming together, nearly done with that pile there. Lots more to do, but boy oh boy, overall, just dressing out all the edges, all the boundaries of the field, weed suppression, soil building, water retention, fertilizing, everything in one stroke with a completely free local resource. What a win.